In this PowerPoint working with faculty, I'm going to talk a lot about my own experience with working with faculty in a small academic library. I looked for an article that kind of summarized faculty and librarian collaboration, but mostly what I found were articles on individual topics such as working with faculty with copyright. So I didn't find one that was really an aggregate. So that's the purpose of this PowerPoint, is to list the many ways that we work with faculty. So I'm going to start with a few reasons why, and we of course assist faculty as part of our patron base. I know that's a given, but I just thought it should be stated at the beginning of this PowerPoint. A less obvious reason is this one, and it is extremely important. Library use is faculty driven. It is just true that if faculty don't assign research projects, students will not use our resources. Faculty like to think that students flock to the library to get background reading and do research, but you know they don't. You know we don't have time. We do. Students do what they're held accountable for, what they're tested for, what they get graded for. A good example of this is especially in the past when they used to put journal articles or books on reserve. It still happens some, but not as much in this digital age. Faculty would put, they would teach a class and then say at the end of the class, well, there's extra reading in reserves in the library. You can go up and read this article I put on there. And the students never would unless they were required to. In the library when I was working, I finally started giving faculty circulation statistics at the end of every semester so they could see that the students just weren't reading those things they put there. So we need faculty, and we need them to make assignments, and we need to work with them and show and enable them to make good assignments for their students to do research. And along with that, uh, faculty are your strongest allies. Sometimes university administration will do things without much input from the library. I've seen some crazy stuff in some small libraries. I just heard recently of an administrator who made the decision that all the books were going to remote storage, and the librarian found out through the grapevine before the administrator had told them. I know of a library that they took their book budget to buy a snowplow for a small campus. But it even happens on large campuses too. Things happen. Faculty will stand up for you and will stand up for what the library stands for. And administrators will listen to faculty, even more so than the university librarian. We are seen as it's a self-interest thing. With faculty, they can say that it's a need. It's what it's important to us, and their opinion carries a lot of weight. So it also helps to have them on your side for when you are making those tough decisions. If you already have a good working relationship with faculty and you do decide to move books to remote storage, they're going to trust that you still have their best interests at heart and that you're doing it for a good reason, even if sometimes it's because it's a budget cut. But they're going to have trust in your decision making. Okay, so what I tried to do here was put into categories some of the things that we do with faculty. For example, these are things that help them in the classroom. But before I talk about that, let me talk about who does all this, because you're going to see a long to-do list of things that ways we work with faculty, and no one person can do all these things. So unless now, if say you're the librarian in the music department, and there may only be another maybe support staff there and student workers, you may be the only librarian that they have interaction with. But lots of times, there's the liaisons, there's people assigned to departments, and it works out that way that all this work is divided up among a number of different librarians, instructional technologists, and you saw some of those categories when you looked at the organizational charts early in the early in this course. The other thing that's before I talk about these, I just want to point out that it might be surprising to you to know that not all faculty are really very library literate. And sometimes that kind of varies by departments. Um, if your instructor is a PhD professor, they've probably had some experience with research and have a better sense of some of the offerings of a library. I dealt a lot with healthcare faculty, nursing, occupational therapy, and physical therapy. These are people with master's degrees because that's the terminal degree in their field, so they're professors. But they didn't come from a really strong research-based program. So a lot of times this stuff is pretty brand new to them. So don't be surprised that they're going to be shocked to find out that you have a lot of these services. So let's take a look at what they are. The first one says services for students, and that just, I put this in here so you would know that not all faculty understand, when they're creating their assignments, they don't know what's available for students. They might not know that you have chat reference, that you can help their students if that assignment's kind of difficult, or that you would mail a book to an online student. They don't have to come in the library and pick it up. So those kind of things, sometimes it's just a matter of a handout that they can, they can give out to the students at orientation, they can have themselves. Not all of these has to be one-on-one working with the faculty. You just finished a unit on information literacy. They need to know that we're available to do class instruction, have the whole class come to the library, or that you could create a tutorial, or you could do a number of different ways of helping them with instruction for their specific assignments. Creating assignments is one that I only did on a couple instances with faculty, and it usually grew out of a poor assignment that students were really struggling for one reason or another. And I would often then contact the professor, and then we would work to make an assignment that the students could be successful and be less frustrated with. It's great when you can do that. That's not, I think they're a little more territorial about that. They don't see that as our realm. So that's something that might happen, but probably not often. Faculty don't keep up with the legal aspects of things like fair use, different copyright acts, and stuff like librarians do. So you can become that expert in, and they will see you as that expert in fair use. They will start to turn to you and ask you questions about, can I do this? Can I do that? That happened very regularly in my position. I put plagiarism on here because the regional campus libraries did a really cool thing with plagiarism. It started with the regional campuses. It was designed there, and the Kent campus does it now, and I think actually some other universities have taken this up. We offer plagiarism school, and the way this works is if an instructor cites a student for plagiarism, university policy is very clear about what happens depending on the university. It could be failure of the class, failure of that assignment. There's a number of different punitive actions that can be taken. So the librarians come up with an alternative, which is plagiarism school. So when a student, first time incident of plagiarism, if the student agrees and the faculty agrees, they can come to a librarian who conducts a session of about an hour and a half where we look at the student's paper, identify the areas of plagiarism, and then almost play a game of why is this plagiarism? Oh, the citation's not complete, and this one's this, and until they have a good grasp of what plagiarism consists of. And I think there's still a little assignment where they take a very short paper essay, and they look for the plagiarism and turn that back in, and they identify it and turn it back in. After they've attended plagiarism school, then the sanctions have been mitigated with the professor. They have worked out something. Maybe they can redo the assignment. Maybe they take a one grade lower, but there's something. It's not as disastrous as you fail the course. And this is really a good thing because it makes it a learning experience rather than a punitive one. And it's also it also fits in with the framework, the old standards, where plagiarism is something that is part of information literacy. So it is part of what we do. Informing the faculty that Creative Commons and, how they can use materials legally. That's always a good thing to teach them. Um, Things like the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. I know there was some recent changes in that. And if, say you work in the film department, you're a film librarian, that's a big deal for that department. You can help guide them through what those new changes are. Online educational resources, you can help them locate that, know about, inform them that they even exist. An embedded librarian. There's been a lot written about embedded librarians. My experience with it is limited. I think I did it one time as a two-person library staff. That took up a huge amount of my time. It was not really practical for me in that case, but if you're a departmental librarian, this is probably something you would be doing. I just threw this one in here because the faculty can be a big help with library collections and with managing your collection. And you can find a number of ways to do this. I mean, if you are in a large library, you're probably, again, the liaison is going to work with the department to take book recommendations and ebook and journal recommendations. But in a small library, what I did is every time a new faculty was hired, I invited them to come in and look at their section. And, again, it's a small library. Make suggestions for purchasing, make suggestions for weeding. And it was really a nice way to get on good footing with the faculty and to help them know that we really were concerned about what their needs are and how we could meet their needs. So, you'd want to make sure that you involved your library faculty in any collection issues. Publishing, again, I mentioned earlier that, some programs the faculty are master's degree level faculty. So their experience with research is going to be much more limited than PhDs. But when they're tenure track and they're required to do publishing, for some of them, this is a pretty new thing. So research, one of the ways we did that, we did individual department workshops. And I suggest that because if you do just a big, broad workshop and you invite the whole faculty, they're probably not going to come. They're just like students. They're too busy. But if you do a workshop that's part of their, fall semester faculty meeting, in my case, I learned that if I got CEUs, continuing education unit credits, healthcare faculty need to keep their licensure up and they need these CEUs. They flock to these workshops. And we made them fun. Of course, we served donuts and coffee, and we made them interesting and fun and just dealt with the resources the library had that could help them with their own personal research. I listed journals there because I just wanted to tell you a short story about that. A number of years ago when we did Live Call, the faculty rated our library very high in every way except journals. One thing I learned though after that is it is a given that faculty will always rate journal collections low. But I knew our journal collection was good with everything we had through OhioLink and KentLink, and for a 2-year programs like we were offering, that the journal collection was more than sufficient. But if they rate it as poor, I understand that it is poor. But you have to ask yourself why. And the conclusion I came to is it's poor because they don't know what we have. And so it was a failure on our part to educate them. So in these workshops, that was always something we did. And again, once they learned what we had, they were just blown away. That's helping them with their research in that way. Key sources in their field, that's sort of the same thing. They do struggle a lot with publishers' intellectual property policies. Many faculty are still under the belief that if they wrote it, it belongs to them. They don't understand that often the journal owns the copyright. So you could help them navigate these policies and help them retain some of that copyright for themselves. and they will appreciate that greatly, because for some of them, this is a really new area. Same with open access. There's some are leery about open access. They're afraid in their tenure and promotion processes they won't be given as much credit for publishing in open access, so you can help them find the correct journals, the right journals. And lots of libraries have actually started paying their processing charges. And I'm sorry for the typo on there. I just now saw the extra R in that. Some libraries have taken, actually from their materials budget, money to pay for article processing charges for faculty in the hopes that more of them will go open access. So we see that as a way of increasing our collection, so making that move seemed reasonable. And the process of self-archiving, you could mentor someone through that process as well. Now, I did say earlier there's a lot of ways you can do this. Provide this assistance. It doesn't always have to be a workshop or face-to-face or a presentation. I don't know how familiar you all are with LibGuides. You know, I think they may have changed their name too. I still call them LibGuides. It's a wonderful system. It's a software package you buy. And the cool thing about it, though, is librarians pretty much agree to share. So here's one that a university has done on finding the journal for the research. And faculty often have this question. So this guides them through doing that. And if you wanted to use this LibGuide, you just send an email to this university and ask if you can copy it. They almost always say yes. You change it and make it look like you did it. You send an email to faculty that are tenure track and say, you know, if you're having trouble finding journals for publication, here's a guide I created for you. Here's another one from Washington University, and this one's about open access. So almost every one of those topics that I talked about, you could probably find a LibGuide for your faculty to use. If your departments have, in our campus, the departments had their own kind of intranet, and we would get the listing of the LibGuides we did that pertain to them, you know, really easily accessed through their own intranets. So the last one I want to talk about here, and this has to do, you actually have an assignment for this this module about metrics for publishing. When a faculty person's preparing a tenure and promotion file, they're pretty stressed. It's a big process to do it. It documents everything you've done. It goes through, you know, a number of different groups who vet that and say if you're worthy of tenure and promotion. So they want to make their products, show them in the best light. And one of the ways that sometimes you can do that is if you can come up with metrics for journal articles they've written that, you know, really show that it's made an impact in their field. A lot of them don't know how to do this, or they would appreciate you helping them do it. So, so one of your assignments is to do that. So it'll give you a little bit of experience in doing that. So I'm going to conclude with this. I found a picture of a faculty workshop. How about that? Kind of hokey, but the point I wanted to make here at the end is it's great to have these kind of collaborations with faculty. You'll make good friends. If you are tenured faculty librarian yourself, this will give you connections that you may want to publish together with faculty. That's always valued. But it will help you in your career as well as you're helping them in their career. And you might just make a new friend. So, the end.